We had a guy with us, Andy, who is a special boat service guy, an SBS, and Brits are the fucking best. They're as funny, or if not funnier than we are, but I compare them like we're the normal keys, they're the sharp keys on a piano. Like it sounds good, but it's a little off.
And they were teaching us all the skills that they had learned over the course of their combat experience.
And one of the reasons why the SBS selection has a lower pass rate than the SAS selection, it's a combined selection course now, but once you've finished the combined selection course, then the SBS members go off and do the diving section. So their selection process continues. And some of them actually don't know that they have claustrophobia. I remember when I was in the SBS in my early days, several Australian SAS guys. The British SBS was affiliated with the Australian SAS for some reason. I never quite understood that. We had an exchange draft with them, and they would often send lads over to play, and we'd go and play with them. And but Australia, they used to always. Them diving like the SEAL teams is mostly in bathwater. It's in beautiful viz. At this point, I'd been diving for probably a year now, and I'd never ever had a dive that I could see more than my extended hands. Once in a while, there was a bit of viz, maybe 5 or 6 or 10 feet, but generally no. You know, you had your compass board, and if you put it at arm's length, it started to disappear. Mm-hmm. And that was it. I thought that was SBS dive. I thought that was diving. That was it. You actually never saw anything. And these couple of these Aussie lads came over, young SAS lads, and been diving in wonderful sort of like clear viz, and came and dived with us. And 2 of them had claustrophobia and didn't know it. And they actually couldn't dive with us because they suffered too much from the claustrophobia. There was a sign in the hallway which said that had just said join the SBS or something, and I just said I want to join the SBS. Meanwhile, what I didn't know was that this MOD notice had gone out to say, you know, we need a large number of SBS recruits because we need to bolster up the SBS, went to Lympstone, and for the first time ever, the PSIs was said, we need a batch of recruits. We just need to get the numbers up for the selection course. And before I could open my mouth, the personnel selection officer said, be careful what you wish for. He said, you're off down to Poole to do one of the hardest special forces selections in the world. He says, you're never going to pass, it's a waste of time, but I have to send you because I'm looking for 15 recruits, of which he did. He found 15. 2 others from my troop. And I was the youngest at 18. And so I believe that made me the youngest. I went down to Poole, and that made me the youngest recruit. But here's another thing that was interesting, which I only found out afterwards. MOD, in their wisdom, and as we know them, it's an odd organisation. I like to joke, made up of people who couldn't make it in Civvy Street, or too afraid to make it in Civvy Street. So I'm going to get panned for that one. And some of them are my mates, 60 years old, people that have never been civilians and think they know everything. Anyway, but let's pound the MOD another time. In their wisdom, they told the SBS, brilliant news, we've got 150, or in this case 147 recruits coming down to do SBS selection. But the SBS said, well, wait a minute, that's all well and good, but we're only equipped to take so many people. And the reason is because the SBS selection course is designed through history that we only have 40 or 50 guys or 60 guys maximum turn up, and only 3 or 4 ever pass. And the final exercise in those days was designed for about 8 people, because that's the most it ever got to the last week in the 4-month grueling selection course. And that's how it was designed. Society, it's not because that's how many they wanted. There's a statistic about society. It produces so many doctors, so many criminals, so many surgeons, and so many special forces. You know, society can only produce given the number of the population. And for the UK, we produce about 10 SBS blokes a year. You know, that's what society produces, whatever the theory of chaos that you subscribe to. But so MOD coming up and telling the SBS that we got 147, basically the SBS said that's fine, but only 4 or 5 are going to get out the other end, because we can only get, 10 people on the final exercise. And so what happened was us 147 people starting in this, if you like, this pyramid or this funnel coming in, the same size hole was at the bottom. And so what they had to do was just make life a bit more difficult. And so us recruits, 15 recruits, well, we were first targets. I mean, no one talked to us. The regular blokes never spoke to us. I mean, we were the lowest forms of life. I mean, I was a complete noddy. I came to attention if someone came in my room. If a corporal came, I did. And I nodded. I was a noddy. I still nodded, when people talked to me. That's how green we were. I mean, it was ridiculous. What were we doing on this selection course? But anyway, somehow, through my complete ignorance, I stayed on there. And 2 of the other guys from my troop were the 3 of us were the only recruits left. And we were there in the last week. And there were about 12 of us left. And 9 of us passed the course. 2 guys, me and 1 other guy from my troop. The other guy came off because broken leg, I think. And at the very end, I got through. I waited outside the office for my interview, thinking that they were going to say, well, don't know what you're doing here, mate, but sod off. Well done, and come back in 3 years. But they actually didn't. They said, well, we don't know what we're going to do with you. You've passed selection. You don't know anything. 11 months ago you were in school in London, and but you're in special forces, and but we're going to try and get you up to speed. 3 months later, I was sat outside Francis Hughes' house, waiting to ambush him with an SAS guy, who must have thought, "What the hell have they sent me?"
I was ex-army. I didn't go the traditional route of the Royal Marines to the Special Boat Service, but having spent 8 years in Free Commander Brigade, and I was also the senior diving instructor for the Army, it was that natural transition for me. So much to the disgust of my mates at Hereford, I decided to go SBS and was one of the earlier members to come across from the Army. And I think now 15% of the SBS are Army. So pretty much one of the earlier guys that opened the floodgates. And as you mentioned then, I joined at a height of war and terror. I was doing operational jumps. We were doing hostage rescues. We were doing everything that you'd signed up to do. I was at the pinnacle of my career. I was living and breathing the life of a SF soldier. And as you rightly touched on there, 2 weeks before going back out on another tour to the Middle East, we were doing pre-deployment training, and I was doing a hey-ho jump, a high altitude, high opening jump. So unlike skydiving where you're clear of lines, when you exit the aircraft, you're still attached to the aircraft to open the parachute, static line it's called. And as I exit the aircraft, my leg got caught up in the line above my head. So my first concern was to clear my leg in time before potentially my leg getting completely taken off. I couldn't release it in time, and my leg got pulled up over my head and to the right. But thankfully, my leg did clear. But straight away, I knew there was a big issue. And at 15,000 feet on the limits of oxygen, I was drifting in and out of consciousness and also vomiting because of the pain. But my first concern was, how was I going to land this? No one else in the team was aware there was a situation at this time, so I still had to travel up to 30 minutes to the DZ. I landed it successfully. It was a great landing, one-legged, but unfortunately, the damage sustained on the exit. I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus within the knee, my hamstring, my quad, and my calf, so all the supporting muscles as well. So everything up until that point was going as I wanted it, and then all of a sudden, just a big curveball with this injury, and that was the start of the end of my career within the military after 16 years. They say be a grey man, don't they? They always say be a grey man, but when you're an army guy going SBS and being one of the first, you're about as grey for about the first 10 minutes when they start calling out the roll call. But there was a couple of instructors on my selection who were X59 and 9 para. 9 para is the airborne engineers. And, you know, when I used to get to the checkpoint on the hill, you know, they'd like, stop, you know, why are you going SBS? And I said, well, I like diving. They're like, that's a shit answer, grab a rock. So I had to pick up a rock, stick it in my Bergen. And that rock had to stay in that Bergen all the way to the end of the day. This went on every day for like 2 weeks. And I was I've had enough of this. So at the weekend when I was home, I just, I Googled Bournemouth Beach heat wave, and there was a 2-page spread from the Centre of the Sun newspaper of topless women. So I printed that off, laminated it, and stuck it in my back pocket. So on the Monday, when I got to the checkpoint, the DS normal procedure was that, right, stop, why are you going SBS? So I put my weapon on my feet out of the mud, took this picture out, and I said, because that's not in Hereford. And they said, yeah, good answer. So from that day on, I didn't have to carry a rock, but I made sure I kept that picture in my back pocket. But just, again, understanding that, you know, humour is one of the ethoses of Special Forces, and in the military anyway, you need to have a sense of humour. I generally believe that anyone in the military can pass the hills. They're physically capable. It's having the right mindset, having the right approach, but it's also staying away from injury. That's a key one on the hills phase, is the fact that, you know, you need to steer clear of injury. And I'd done selection a few years previous and got injured myself on the hills. I tore my lateral meniscus. So I was always conscious of not a reoccurring injury. So I'd always make sure I was up 30 minutes before, taping my ankles and everything else. But I generally believe, you know, if you're prepared properly, but what they do now, which is probably different from when you're in, rather than guys used to go on selection not knowing what selection was about, and you only get 2 opportunities. So a lot of guys would waste an opportunity either because they weren't physically prepared, or military skills they weren't prepared, or map reading. So now you have a briefing course at Hereford and a briefing course at Poole, whichever way you want to go. You spend a week with those units and you do a lot of physical tests, you do a lot of soldiering tests, so they will let you know whether you are ready to go, so you're not wasting opportunities. So the only reason you should come up is for injury, which is great moving forward.
They could see on the briefing course, Jesus Christ, this is an absolute ball of fire. You know, and that's why we're going to load you on selection. Be aware that if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't be, because you haven't got enough experience. You know, you've only been in for a couple of years. You've got no operational experience, but we can see that you want this so much, and that you're serious. You know, they could see it in my eyes. That I got loaded onto selection. The other thing that really motivated me was the sergeant major said, on one condition, I'm going to load you on the briefing course on one condition, that if you fail it, I'm drafting you to Scotland. Bearing in mind, we just moved from London to the married quarters in Plymouth. So we were kind of loving life, because Plymouth compared to London was beautiful. You got all the moors and the countryside almost. It was beautiful. Went home, explained that to my wife, and she said, okay, well, I'm going to, you know, put one up on that. If you don't pass and you get drafted to Scotland, I'm not coming with you. So I thought, Jesus Christ, it's all to play for. But you know what? It didn't fade. I thought, I'm going to put that to the back of my head. You know, I really want this. So I'm the best chance I've got of succeeding is to just keep keep my mind on the fact of that this is what I want. The one thing that did worry me was injury. You know, I knew that it was never really going to be an issue with me thinking I can't do this and I want to give up. So yeah, it was injury, but I was lucky. Once you pass selection, so you've got your phases of selection, which is the hills phase, then onto the jungle, resistance to interrogation, escape and evasion, then do a bit of continuation training still with the Hereford lads, because you then get badged at the end. If you're lucky enough to pass after the escape and evasion and resistance to interrogation phase, you then get badged. You've then got to do a period afterwards of continuation training, where you go up to Hereford, you do all of your close quarter battles, your CQB training in the killing house. Hereford, because of their budget, we even had an ex-Olympian, an ex-Olympic sharpshooter who taught us handgun skills on the range, so on and so forth.
Wow.
You're still together at that point, plus all of the car drills where they've got a drive-on range, where you can actually drive onto the range and practice doing your car drills if you come up to an illegal VCP and you've got to start, get out the car, start shooting at the threat and pull back. So you're still together at that point. Once you've done that, you then go your separate ways. So the Hereford lads then go to their squadrons and the SB lads go to their squadrons. And you're still on your continuation training. So that's then when the diving takes place for the pool lads, and whatever continuation training it is that they do at Hereford, whether it be the skydiving, so on and so forth.